Okay, we're diving straight into it today. We've got some classic material here shared by one of you. It's excerpts from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
That's right. This deep dive is really centered around these principles Andrew Carnegie shared with Hill. Hill spent, over 20 years researching super successful people, figuring out how they built their wealth.
So think of this as us trying to get to the core of what Hill saw as this kind of magic formula, apparently tested by thousands.
Hmm.
For anyone wanting to learn how successful people made money back then,
Hmm.
and maybe how these ideas still sort of land today. Carnegie even hoped it would be taught everywhere, seems like.
Yeah, exactly. We've got quite a stack of pages here. It covers everything from, the power of desire and faith,
Hmm.
right through to practical planning and overcoming fear. Our mission today really is to pull out the most important bits, the surprising facts, and the actionable insights for you from this text.
Okay, let's unpack this and see what these pages really say about thinking and growing rich.
So right away, the source starts talking about the secret and how it was applied. It mentions Charles M. Schwab using it when organizing U.S. Steel.
Hmm.
That deal was worth something like $600 million to the people involved, which was huge back then.
Wow.
And President Woodrow Wilson apparently used it during World War I for training soldiers and fundraising. Even Manuel L. Quezon using it to gain freedom for the Philippine Islands.
That's quite a range of impact, isn't it? From big industry to, well, national freedom.
Hmm.
And the core seems to kick off with desire. The sources really stress having a definite desire, not just vaguely wishing for something. That story about Edwin C. Barnes is a great example. He didn't just want a job for Edison. He was determined to work with him, like as a partner.
Right.
He was so set on it, he actually traveled by blind baggage, basically hiding on a freight train because he had no money for a ticket.
That's intense.
Yeah, that's definitely not just ordinary desire, is it? The source calls it a burning desire. It reminds me of Marshall Field, after the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, his store burned down.
And he supposedly stood there and just declared he'd rebuild the world's greatest store right on that spot, no matter how many times it burned down. That kind of absolute determination, that burning desire, seems to be the key starting point.
And right alongside desire, the source puts faith. It's very clear faith is a state of mind. And crucially, it says it can be induced by autosuggestion.
Induced, yeah.
It calls it the eternal elixir that gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. It's framed as the starting point for getting rich and even the basis for what it calls miracles.
It's fascinating how the source describes using faith. Hill himself talks about wanting his son, who was born deaf, to hear and speak normally. He says he consciously mixed faith with that powerful desire and just persistently communicated it to his son for years.
Wow.
And the source says his son came to believe him, and, results followed.
So faith isn't passive belief. It sounds really active, fueled by conviction. The source brings up Mahatma Gandhi as just an astounding example of this. Here's a man with no money, no home, no army, yet he wielded incredible power. The source says this power came from his followers' absolute faith in him, a faith he actively built.
Precisely. And that raises the question, how do you build this state of mind? The answer given is autosuggestion. The source explains that any thought impulse, if you repeatedly pass it to your subconscious mind, is eventually accepted and acted upon.
Okay, so the subconscious is always listening, always absorbing things. But it's not just about dry thoughts, is it? The source says plain, unemotional words do not influence the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
You need feeling.
Exactly. You have to emotionalize those thoughts, especially with belief. Give them some juice, basically.
Right.
And this takes persistence. That's another key principle. Being able to influence your subconscious like this, it has a price. Everlasting persistence. It's called the keystone in the arch of the whole philosophy.
So it's central.
Very. It even suggests reading the chapter on autosuggestion aloud every night until you're totally convinced it's sound. That really underlines the need for deliberate, sustained effort.
Okay, so we've got the burning desire, the faith built through emotionalized autosuggestion. That's the internal setup. How does that actually lead to making money? The source says knowledge is next, but with a really important warning. Knowledge is only potential power.
That's a huge distinction.
Ah.
It only becomes real power when it's organized into definite plans of action and directed to a definite end. This, the source suggests, is where a lot of people, they miss the boat. They learn things, but don't turn it into a plan.
And you need specialized knowledge, right, for whatever you plan to offer in return for wealth. But interestingly, you don't necessarily have to possess all that knowledge yourself. Like Andrew Carnegie, the source, says he knew almost nothing about the technical side of making steel.
Right. But he knew how to find that knowledge, and he did it through his mastermind group.
Ah, the mastermind.
Yes, this introduces that core concept. It's about forming an alliance, a group of people, to create and carry out your plans, and importantly, in a spirit of harmony. The source is pretty blunt. No individual has sufficient experience, education, native ability, and knowledge to ensure the accumulation of a great fortune without the cooperation of other people.
So teamwork, but more than just teamwork.
Yes, plans should be joint efforts, checked and refined by the group.
That makes a lot of sense. Like Henry Ford, the source points out, his biggest progress came after he became friends with people like Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone, John Burroughs, Luther Burbank. Their friendly alliance of minds, as the source calls it, generated power. It even suggests you sort of absorb the nature and the thinking power of those you hang out with harmoniously.
Yeah, the definition given is coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. It even hints at a kind of psychic element, where the aligned minds create this affinity or combined energy.
Okay, desire, faith, autosuggestion for the inner drive, the knowledge and the mastermind for the plan. What locks it all in? Decision. Lack of decision is flagged as a major cause of failure.
A definite decision.
Yeah.
Absolutely critical. And there's a strong warning here. Don't be too easily swayed by what others think. Especially, the source says, friends and relatives. They can, even meaning well, kill your confidence with ridicule or doubt.
Ouch.
Keep your own counsel, basically.
Yeah.
Except, of course, with your mastermind group, because they are in harmony with your purpose.
Okay, this next part is really striking. The source connects definite decision directly to the founding of the United States. It talks about John Hancock and Samuel Adams making that incredibly risky decision to demand British troops leave Boston.
Yeah.
That single decision by just two guys is called the beginning of the freedom which we now enjoy. That's a bold claim.
It is. And the ultimate example given is the signers of the Declaration of Independence. They debated, reached a decision, and then every single one of them put their life on the line by signing it. The source frames this as creating a nation where making decisions is a fundamental privilege.
But it also points out that the habit of indecision, maybe picked up in school, often carries over into adult life. People just drift into jobs instead of actively planning and deciding on a specific path.
So once you have that definite plan and you've made your decision, the next essential ingredient is persistence. This is described as the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. It's basically willpower mixed with desire, an irresistible pair, the source calls it.
You know, it makes you think, people who seem maybe cold or ruthless, maybe they just have really strong willpower combined with that persistence. The source mentions Fannie Hurst, Kate Smith, W.C. Fields in entertainment, people who just kept at it until they broke through.
Right. And Thomas Edison and Henry Ford are highlighted again. Their persistence is presented as maybe their biggest source of achievement, even more than other qualities. You see it in historical figures, too, like the Prophet Muhammad demonstrating that sustained effort against all odds.
And I like how the source reframes temporary defeat. It says, when you face defeat, it's usually the plan that's wrong, not you, the advice. Rebuild the plan, keep going. That line is memorable. A quitter never wins, and a winner never quits.
Absolutely. And tying back to creating those plans, you need imagination. The source calls it the catalyst. It's what mixes specialized knowledge with ideas to create organized plans. And ideas, they have no fixed price. Their value is immense.
That's where the Coca-Cola story comes in, right?
Right.
The source says that whole empire grew from just one single idea. The secret ingredient that the drug clerk, Asa Candler, added wasn't just syrup. It was imagination.
It suggests that, look, specialized knowledge is out there. You can find it. But imagination is the key quality needed to combine that knowledge with a great idea and turn it into something successful. All those stories in the source, like Barnes turning his disability into an asset, or that woman starting the traveling bookkeeping service, they're meant to spark your imagination.
Okay, let's go a bit deeper into the mind itself. The source says the mind builds or destroys. We talked about the mastermind for planning, but it's also presented as a way to gain actual power.
Yeah. Power may be produced through a friendly alliance of minds. It really hammers home that idea that you take on the nature, the habits, and yes, the power of thought of the people you associate with harmoniously. Choose your circle wisely, basically.
And the subconscious mind gets a huge role. It's like this filing cabinet that receives and stores sense impressions, thoughts, and it acts on your dominant desires, especially when they're mixed with strong emotion.
And it's working all the time, day and night. And through some process, the source admits we don't fully understand it. It supposedly taps into what it calls infinite intelligence to transmute those desires into reality. The key is you can voluntarily plant ideas in your subconscious, especially if they're charged up with faith.
Okay, that term infinite intelligence. What exactly is the source saying it is? It seems to use it interchangeably with God, divine power, the supreme being. It's presented as this universal source of intelligence, like a field you can connect with for information and insight, permeating everything.
Right. And the creative imagination is described as the direct link between our finite human mind and that infinite intelligence. This is supposedly where breakthroughs, revelations, and discoveries happen, sometimes just flashing into your mind as a hunch. The source even mentions early experiments suggesting things like telepathy might be real and stronger when the mind is stimulated.
Which brings us to mind stimuli. The source lists a few, but it really focuses heavily on the sex urge, calls it the greatest and most powerful stimulus.
Yeah, it's a controversial part for some, but the idea presented is that when this incredibly powerful drive is harnessed and transmuted meaning, redirected from purely physical expression, it can lift people to a higher sphere of thought, fueling creativity and genius. The source lists famous names: Washington, Napoleon, Lincoln, Edison, people known to have strong passions, suggesting their genius was powered in part by this transmuted energy. It even calls personal magnetism sex energy.
So the emphasis is on channeling it, not just, well, indulging it. The source definitely warns against artificial stimulants like alcohol, saying they often lead to destruction, unlike nature's stimulants like love and sex energy when handled constructively.
Exactly. And it stresses that the creative faculty responds most strongly to emotions, not cold reason. Love, in particular, is highlighted as a powerful emotion that nurtures artistic nature and inspires creative effort.
It all comes back to controlling your mind, doesn't it? The path to genius, according to this source, involves developing, controlling, and using these powerful energies, sex, love, romance, constructively, and at the same time actively discouraging destructive emotions like hate, envy, jealousy, greed.
And the mind is a creature of habit, so control comes from persistence, from consciously working to change your dominant thoughts.
But before you can effectively use all these positive principles, the source argues your mind needs preparing. You have to clear out the enemies within, mainly fear. It lists the 6 ghosts of fear.
Ah, yes, the big 6. Fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love, fear of old age, and the fear of death. Pretty much covers the major anxieties, wouldn't you say?
It really does. The fear of poverty is called the most destructive. And here's a really provocative idea from the source. It suggests the mass thought of poverty after the 1929 crash actually helped cause the depression, because thought crystallizes into its physical equivalent.
Wow, that's quite a claim.
Yeah. It basically says poverty and riches go in opposite directions. You have to actively refuse thoughts and circumstances leading to poverty.
The fear of criticism. The
Yeah.
source says it shows up everywhere. From conforming in how you dress, it even weirdly claims wearing hats just to fit in can cause baldness, to having a weak personality, avoiding conflict, feeling inferior.
And the fear of ill health. That can lead to hypochondria, imagining illnesses, avoiding exercise. The source cites doctors estimating 75% of people seeing them suffer from hypochondria, and the fear itself can create symptoms. It even mentions patent medicines thriving on this fear.
Then the fear of loss of love, called the most painful. Rooted in ancient instincts, maybe, but now playing out through manipulation, using wealth or empty promises.
And the fears of old age and death are linked. Fear of poverty in old age, fear of the unknown after death. Sometimes made worse, the source suggests, by old religious teachings focused on punishment.
So what's the antidote to these fears? First, recognize you're susceptible. We all are, probably. Then, consciously build habits to counteract them. And this is key. Keep your mind closed off from people who drag you down, who discourage you.
Right. Surround yourself with people who encourage you to think and act for yourself. Oh, and it even says clean out your medicine cabinet as a symbolic blow against the fear of ill health.
It lists other failure causes too: indecision, procrastination, lack of persistence, wrong job, poor concentration, spending wildly, wanting something for nothing, bad health, bad environment, lots of things. Many linked back to fear. The core solution: mind control. Keep your mind busy with a definite purpose, a definite plan. Like Henry Ford, who, it says, mastered this.
Okay, let's bring this down to brass tacks. How does all this apply to, say, marketing yourself, selling your skills or services? There's a whole section on marketing personal services. It's not just about job hunting. It's a different way to think about your value.
Yeah, the future employer-employee relationship is envisioned as more of a partnership, both serving the public, who is seen as the real boss. This needs a go-giver attitude, not just go-getter. Focus on giving exceptional value.
And you market yourself like a product with careful planning, showcasing your specialized knowledge, your experience, your references. The source gets really detailed about preparing a resume and application. Very practical.
And here's a radical suggestion it makes. Offer to work on probation. Maybe even for free initially, just to prove your worth. It sounds crazy today, maybe, but the Force argues it shows massive confidence and often gets you hired and paid for that trial period too.
Huh, interesting.
Also, neatness in your application matters. It signals you're careful, painstaking. The source claims they help people get hired just off the resume, no interview needed.
And the qualities needed go beyond just skills, right? Industry, hard work, efficiency, quality, and quantity. And this crucial one, spirit of service, meaning being agreeable, harmonious, someone people want to cooperate with. Carnegie apparently wouldn't keep brilliant jerks. Harmony was key.
That's exactly. Other qualities listed: initiative, ambition, resourcefulness, pleasing personality, sympathy, understanding, mastering details, taking responsibility for your team's mistakes, cooperation, making suggestions, being open-minded, learning from mistakes, and developing the habit of success.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
How do you track all that? The source suggests an annual self-analysis, like a business inventory, but for yourself. It even gives 28 specific, quite tough questions to ask yourself honestly each year to see where you're slipping and where you're growing.
And finally, the source puts all this opportunity squarely within the context of the American system. It lists all these freedoms: thought, speech, education, religion, choosing your job, owning property, choosing where you live, who you marry, aiming for any position. Extensive freedoms.
It uses that example of a simple breakfast, right? Coffee from Brazil, sugar from Cuba, melon from Texas, showing the vast capitalist system needed just to get those things to your table. Billions of dollars, millions of jobs.
But the key takeaway here, the source emphasizes, is that while America offers huge opportunity, it does not and cannot bring riches without effort. The only reliable way is providing useful service, giving value for value received. No system, it argues, can ethically let you get rich without giving something equivalent back.
So it frames capitalism as respecting the law of economics. You get back value equivalent to what you give. And it suggests America is a great place to seek riches because its citizens spend so much money annually on everything from haircuts to cars to movies. The opportunity is there.
It admits the system isn't perfect, sure, but it argues it offers almost limitless opportunity for anyone willing to work hard, think smart, and apply these principles, especially definiteness of decision. It even includes a rather pointed line saying if you don't like the system here, you have the freedom to leave.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a deep dive into some really potent ideas. From that concept of a burning desire fueled by faith and autosuggestion, all the way to the practical steps of planning with a mastermind group and making those definite decisions. It's a whole philosophy.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, while accumulating money is a focus, it's broader than that, isn't it? It's fundamentally about understanding the power of your own mind, getting a handle on the fears that hold you back, and channeling your energy and your relationships in a constructive way.
Yeah, those anecdotes, Schwab's $600 million idea, Barnes hopping a freight train, the Coca-Cola origin story, they really make the principles come alive. And linking definite decisions to the actual founding of America, that's a pretty dramatic illustration.
It really underscores that success, in this view, requires conscious, deliberate action. Organizing knowledge into plans, cultivating that persistence, using imagination, mastering your thoughts and emotions. And that annual self-analysis idea provides a surprisingly practical framework for trying to do that.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean for you listening? I guess the biggest takeaway seems to be this idea that you have more power than you might think to influence your own destiny, not just by working hard, but by deliberately directing your thoughts and desires, backing them with faith, and sticking with them through persistence.
Yeah, as the source puts it quite starkly, mind control is the result of self-discipline and habit. You either control your mind or it controls you. There's not much middle ground presented there.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on based on everything we've covered. If your mind truly builds or destroys, as the source claims, and you are the potential master of your thoughts, what dominant thought linked to a real burning desire will you choose to feed your mind starting today?
Something to really reflect on. Maybe revisit some of these principles as you move forward on your own path.
That's all for this deep dive. We really hope these insights from the source have given you plenty to think about.